James the Just held the central leadership role in Jerusalem during the decades following the death of Jesus. Yet, in the historical record, he remains a cipher. He is a figure of immense importance who effectively vanishes when we try to reconstruct his life using traditional biographical tools. His authority was anchored here, in Jerusalem. From the temple precincts, he governed the earliest community of Jesus' followers, directing its growth and internal policy. Many researchers fall into the historicist fallacy, the attempt to extract a literal, objective biography from primary sources that were never intended to be objective. The canonical Gospels marginalize James. He appears briefly, often as a skeptical relative, a narrative choice that ensures the focus remains exclusively on Jesus' ministry. The Book of Acts presents a different James. Here, he is an ecclesiastical diplomat, elevated to the status of a supreme adjudicator, whose primary function is to resolve the internal friction between Jewish and Gentile believers. In the Pauline epistles, James is a theological antagonist. Paul references James's emissaries primarily to define his own law-free gospel against the stricter requirements of the Jerusalem Center. These sources are governed by competing theological agendas. Attempting to harmonize them into a single biographical profile is methodologically flawed. Bruce Chilton proposes a different path, the generative approach. This method shifts focus away from the man's personal life. Instead, it tracks the specific practices, linguistic markers, and beliefs that were generated in his name and maintained by his followers. Analyzing these nodal points allows us to map the movement's actual impact on first-century Palestinian Judaism without relying on the sparse biographical data. In the 1st century, the Judean wilderness was home to various sectarian groups, each defining themselves through a strict, isolated adherence to their interpretation of the law. Historical reconstructions often oversimplify this landscape, attempting to merge distinct groups into a single anti-Roman movement. Robert Eisenman famously proposed that James the Just was actually the teacher of righteousness described in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This fragment is typical of the Qumran evidence base. Eisenman's theory rests on a specific type of internal linguistic analysis of these Hebrew texts. His method builds a chain of connections, linking the Hebrew root sad da ka to righteousness, then zeal for the law, and attributing this to James. But chronology contradicts this. These Qumran texts point to the 1st century BCE, over a century before James. Furthermore, the term righteousness is a core concept across all of Second Temple Judaism. Its presence in 2 different texts is not enough to prove a direct, esoteric link between the authors. Philip Davies suggests a more grounded comparison. While the groups are distinct, they share a sociological profile. Both the Qumran sect and the early Jesus movement were messianic, Torah observant, and viewed the Jerusalem priesthood as corrupt. James's movement existed as a parallel expression of this sectarian energy, a temple-devoted branch of Judaism that remained firmly within the traditional covenant. To find the actual evidence of this community's thought, we have to look at the document attributed to its leader, the Epistle of James. Traditional scholarship often dismissed the epistle as a later Gentile work, arguing that its sophisticated Greek style was beyond the reach of a Galilean leader like James. This view overlooks the widespread functional bilingualism of 1st century Jerusalem. A leader managing a diverse city and a growing international following would have used Greek as a primary tool of governance. The text contains a specific linguistic fingerprint, Semitic syntactic structures. These are Hebrew idioms translated directly into Greek words, preserving the original Hebrew logic. We see this clearly in James 1:22, with the phrase poietai logu. Hellenistically, this means poet. However, the author directly translates the Hebrew idiom, doer of the law, ignoring common Greek meaning to create a syntactic mirror of a Jewish concept. This construction is not a simple citation from the Greek Septuagint. It is a unique, independent translation that appears only in this epistle. This specific choice reveals an author who is thinking within a Hebrew conceptual framework while communicating in a sophisticated Greek dialect. The presence of this bilingual fingerprint suggests the work of a highly organized Jewish Christian community in Jerusalem, translating their core beliefs for the wider world. For the Jerusalem Center, communicating with a growing diaspora required more than just translation. It required a formal mechanism of authority. The structural characteristics of the Epistle of James align with a specific literary category, the formal diaspora letter. This format was traditionally used by high-ranking Judean authorities to send binding instructions and ethical guidance to Jewish communities living outside of Palestine. This genre explains the epistle's unusual structure. It is famously disjointed, lacking the smooth logical transitions found in Hellenistic philosophy. We find sudden shifts in vocabulary and tone, such as different Greek words for endurance appearing in different sections without explanation. The text resembles a compilation of discrete units, individual sermons and oral traditions, edited into a single document. This process preserved James's teachings after his execution. By compiling his sayings, the community ensured his voice continued to lead. The document allowed the Jerusalem leadership to project a consistent Torah-centric identity to remote Greek-speaking followers across the Mediterranean. The epistle functions as a deliberate vehicle for Jacobean authority, purposefully designed to maintain the movement's theological boundaries. The traditional attempt to find a biographical James in the ancient texts is fundamentally constrained by the theological goals of those authors. However, the generative method provides a clearer picture of the movement James led. Textual evidence shows a community that remained strictly observant of the law and deeply connected to the temple. The linguistic and structural data reveal a highly organized network capable of using sophisticated bilingual tools to export this Jerusalem-based authority. The profile that emerges is a self-aware iteration of Israelite theology. This model differs significantly from the later Pauline focus. While Paul argued for a law-free path for Gentiles, James's movement maintained the necessity of Jewish practice for those within the covenant. These textual and sociological markers point toward a specific identity for the early movement. At the moment of its generation, the group centered in Jerusalem operated as a branch of Judaism, expressing its faith in Jesus through the established structures of the law. By tracking nodal practices and linguistic fingerprints, we uncover a history that biography alone cannot reach. While the man remains elusive, the foundational structure of the movement James led is visible. By looking at what he generated, we finally understand the origins of the movement he left behind.